The boardroom was immaculate. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows as the executive team presented their strategic review to the new CEO. Charts were flawless, data was impeccable. Every question received a confident, well-rehearsed answer. After the presentation, the CEO turned to me and whispered with visible satisfaction, "This is the sharpest team I have ever inherited." I said nothing in return, but my internal response was a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. What I had witnessed was not excellence. It was a perfectly choreographed performance of avoidance, a performance of deception. Not a single uncomfortable truth had been uttered. Not one risk had been named as anything less than fully mitigated. The silence in that room was not empty. It was packed to the ceiling with everything the team knew but dared not to say. Welcome to the Leadership Factory. This is a platform where we offer creative insights and solutions to businesses and leaders. And my name is Dr. Emmanuel Toye Shubande. I am a strategic leadership expert, executive coach, and conference speaker, and award-winning author. On today's episode, we are discussing the topic, a leader's loneliest question. Why didn't anyone tell me? Last week, we explored how your unspoken anxiety becomes your team's emotional weather system. This week, we must examine what your team does with that weather system. They learn to be quiet. They learn to tell you what you want to hear. And they do it without malice, but out of a deeply humane, deeply rational survival instinct. We call this phenomenon organizational silence. And it is the single greatest undetected cancer in modern leadership. A comprehensive study by leadership scholar Amy Edmondson found that across industries, most employees can identify a significant problem within their organization but chose not to raise it. The reason is rarely fear of retaliation. It is something far more subtle and pervasive. The belief that speaking up is simply not worth the effort. They have learned through countless small interactions that their leader prefers smooth surfaces to messy depths. They have observed how the colleagues who raised a difficult question were subtly sidelined in subsequent meetings and edged out of the organization. The tragedy is that you, the leader, remain blissfully unaware of this underground river of unspoken knowledge. You wonder why innovation has plateaued. You puzzle over why the same problems persist repeatedly. You cannot fix what you cannot see, and you cannot see what your team has collectively decided to hide. The most dangerous gap in your organization is not the skills gap or the technology gap. It is the say-do gap, the chasm between what your people know and what they voice. If silence is the disease, what then is the cure? It cannot simply be an open door policy or a town hall meeting where you ask, "Is there any questions? Does anyone have a question for me?" You see, these rituals have become the leadership equivalent of a doctor asking a patient, "How are you feeling?" And at the same time, the same doctor, while talking, was walking out of the door. The cure requires a fundamental shift in how you receive information, not just how you solicit it. Begin with what I call rewarding the dissenter. This is not about cutting conflict aimlessly. It is about consciously, visibly celebrating the person who brings the uncomfortable truth, who says something nobody wants to say. When a team member raises a concern that challenges the prevailing narrative, your first instinct may be defensiveness. It's only rational. Resist it. Instead, pause, take a breath. Then say something like this: "That took courage. Thank you. Thank you for saying it, and let me understand you more." Then, crucially, follow up publicly. Reference their concern in subsequent communications and subsequent meetings. Show the organization that raising a difficult truth is not a career-limiting move, but a career-enhancing one. You are not just permitting honesty, you are programming it into your cultural operating system. Next, practice requesting the reframe. Now, let me explain what I mean by this. When a problem is presented, resist the temptation to accept the framing at face value. Ask these questions. If we were to look at this from the perspective of our toughest competitor, what would they see that we are missing? Or, if our harshest critic were in this room, what would they say about this approach we're about to take? These questions create psychological distance. They allow truth to be spoken, not as personal criticism, but as a strategic exploration. They give your team permission to borrow voices of dissent without personally owning the discomfort. Finally, institutionalize what I call the elephant hunt. Once a quarter, gather your leadership team and explicitly state to them, for the next hour, we are not discussing what is going well in our organization. We are only discussing what we are avoiding. What is the conversation we are not having? What is the risk we are secretly most worried about? Make this meeting or this activity a ritual. Make it expected. Make it safe by making it mandatory for everyone. You'll be astonished at what surfaces when silence is stripped of its protective function. Think of a decision your organization made recently that later proved flawed. Was there anyone who saw the flaw in advance? If so, why did they not speak? If not, why did they not see it? What is the one question you are secretly afraid to ask your team because you dread the answer? This week, conduct what I call a silence audit. Schedule a 30 minutes with a trusted, relatively junior member of your organization, someone far enough from your daily orbit to a different perspective. Have a different perspective. When you meet, say these exact words. I am going to ask you 3 questions. I want you to answer me honestly. I promise I will not defend myself. I will not explain. I will not react. I will only listen and thank you. Then ask, what is one thing our leadership team is completely blind to? Your next question is, what is one conversation we should be having that we are avoiding? If you could change one thing about how I lead, what would it be? Then keep your promise. Keep your promise. Listen. Say thank you to him or her and then walk away. Sit with what you have heard for 24 hours before responding. Ponder on it. Reflect on it. You may discover that the silence you thought was golden was the sound of your organization slowly suffocating. The truth will not always be comfortable. It is the only raw material from which real growth is forged. Remember, leadership is not about creating harmony. It is about creating the conditions where the truth, however dissonant, can finally be heard. Thank you for listening. For more insight and engagement, you can send me an email. Send an email to contactme@toyeshobande.com and pay attention to the announcement right after this. See you next time and watch out for our next episode. Enjoy your day. Bye. Thank you.